Okay, so the show starts off and we got like a literal bird's eye view. We see a hawk flying in over this kind of like hidden, secluded mountainous area. And there's kind of a little dugout Shangri-La. It's a real Bob Ross kind of thing. Yeah, and then we'll just stick a little happy green butthole right here. So the hawk flies into the little black hole here. Let's call it a belly button instead of a butthole, but you can see what it is. And then inside there we see the Mogwai village, and it's a real Ewok village kind of deal. You know, they're in there singing their songs, and they're happy, and they're clearly high. But there's all sorts of riches and wealth going on, and it's kind of a perfect idealized place to live, you know. So as soon as we kind of get the vibe that this is a sweet, happy, wonderful place to be, the hawk swoops in and grabs one of the Mogwai and pulls him out, and the two of them have this big aerial battle, and they're duking it out in the sky. And eventually the Mogwai breaks free of the bird and ends up in a broken part of a tree that then breaks off and falls into a river. So we've seen the baby Moses in the basket bit before, right? Like, you know, he's going to be taken on an adventure that the universe puts him on. He has no control over his destiny. Except this time, Moses is floating in a sea of acid gangbangs. Like, the Mogwai does not want to get out of this boat at all for fear of all sorts of pain and, you know, give birth to who knows how many other little siblings. So he stays in the boat for days and nights, avoiding any rain or anything. And after about 2 or 3 days of being out on the sea, he washes up on the shore next to a circus. Of course, the circus are run by like mean, greedy jerks who are happy to have like a new cat dog as their main attraction for their failing circus. And that's where we go fade to black and we go show intro. Nothing real spectacular or memorable with the show intro. I've seen things like it before. I barely even remember it now, and I watched it 3 different times, so yeah, I don't know. Then we start with the title card, Shanghai 1920. We meet the Wing family. Sam is the son, his mom is a doctor, his dad is like the assistant to the mom. They appear to be running some sort of family medical business, kind of like an urgent care or something. So they're mixing up herbs and trying to make medicines and stuff. In back lives Grandpa in the back room. He's like this old crazy coot adventurer who's just full of wild stories, and he's fun to hang out with, and Sam likes him, but he's also kind of half afraid of him because he seems to be off his rocker. He's voiced by James Hong. If you know James Hong, right away you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. So it gets to a point where Mom needs to send Sam to the market, and Grandpa wants to go with. And Grandpa is nothing but trouble. And the mom warns him, look, if Grandpa starts talking about adventures or whatever, you just immediately come home because this dude is going to get you into trouble. And Sam seems to be a good boy who's like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But when Grandpa gives Sam his adventure box, Sam's immediately on board with that. So it seems like there's a little bit of wild side to Sam. On a side note, you'll notice the adventure box on his back there is the same box that they keep the Mogwai in the original. Also, if you figure that this is Shanghai 1920 and Sam is like 10 years old, you got to figure that there's a good chance Sam is going to grow up to be this fella here. So Grandpa and Sam go off out on the street, and Grandpa immediately says, let's go to the cheaper market so we have some money left over so we can go to the circus. And who, of course, is the star attraction at the circus? So the cat dog is out there dancing and putting on his little two-step, and it's kind of cute. The Grandpa recognizes that this Mogwai is not a cat dog. And he spins a yarn to Sam about how the Mogwai had previously gotten loose, and then they, turned into someone fed them after midnight, and they turned green, and then they got wet, and the water everywhere. And he explains the huge responsibility of the Mogwai, and how if they fall into the wrong hands, they're basically, like a weapon of war. And at one point, the Mogwai had almost destroyed everything. So him seeing one kind of freaks him out. And he's like, we need to get that Mogwai and get it back to its, I think it's the Valley of Jade, or is it the Jade Valley? Valley of Jade, let's call it that until I find differently. So the little kid's like, okay, cool, I'll help you steal this thing. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I say, him being a good boy is pretty questionable. But, yeah, he's out here. He's down to ride. So they sneak around back, and they're going to free this Mogwai from this circus prison he's living in. So there ends up being kind of this Mexican standoff between the street children, who are sort of silly and wacky, and then the Sam and his grandpa, who are pure of heart, and then the evil circus folk, and shenanigans ensue. And at some point, Sam gets alone with the Mogwai, and the Mogwai explains to him that his name is Gizmo. I'll get to that. So, you know what? I'll get to it now, dang it. That's just stupid. The whole thing is Gizmo is named Gizmo because he was purchased for his son by Rand Peltzer. Randall Peltzer is an inventor. So in his little bit of alone time with Gizmo before passing him on to his son for Christmas, discovers his name is Gizmo, or calls him Gizmo. And Rand even says, like, I've been calling him Gizmo. He seems to like it. I understand why they did this for the show, that they made his name Gizmo way earlier, because what else are you going to call him for the series of the show? Like, you need to be able to call him Gizmo so you can sell your Gizmo merchandise and people recognize that, oh, this is the character we know and everything. But at the same time, it's just kind of stupid. Regardless, so I'm not happy with him being Gizmo that early, but, we understand. It's a function of storytelling. But eventually Sam and Gizmo and Grandpa all get away from the wild outbreak of craziness that happens with everybody scrambling trying to secure this Mogwai, and they escape back to Sam's home. And they bring the Mogwai in and introduce it to his parents. And the parents are kind of like, what in the hell is this? But they're immediately attracted to it too. See, there's this thing with the Mogwai. In this cartoon especially, they're trying to make it seem like the Mogwai is kind of the ring in Lord of the Rings. Like, it's a power that people wish to possess, but it also has this allure to it, like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. Everyone who sees a Mogwai kind of falls in love with it, and their eyes get real big, and they want one. So only the right, pure of heart people can actually possess one, because otherwise they'll do bad with it. That's why I said there's a Lord of the Rings vibe to a lot of the underlying bit of this. But once they introduce Gizmo to the parents, and the parents are like, wow, and Grandpa's like, see, isn't that cool? They have the Mogwai in their custody for approximately 10 minutes, and they spill a carafe of water on it. Are you kidding me? You had 2 jobs. 2. How hard is this? So, of course, we have to see Gizmo go through the pain of childbirth several times, and he shoots out like 4 or 5 little tribbles all over this room they're hanging out in. They put them in a little box, and we understand that this show, within 1 episode, has already pretty much done a soft reboot of the Gremlins concept. We have the family unit together, and they have possession of a Mogwai who's sort of good by nature, but that Mogwai has gotten wet, and the Mogwais it's reproduced are not good by nature. So they did a good job of getting through the pipe laying as fast as possible in 1 episode. 1 or 2 little Easter eggs here or there, not bad. Before the show completely ends, we go back to the street urchin girl, the one that was trying to steal the Mogwai. And we see her conversing with her, like, evil emperor from Star Wars type villain boss guy. And he explains to her, you owe me a debt and you're under my thumb for that. The boss is this guy, Riley Green, and he's chewing up the scenery. I don't know if a voice actor can do that, but if you can, he is. It's unbelievable how big his performance is. It's kind of great. He's played by Matthew Rhys. I don't know if you know him. He was in The Americans. That's where I know him from. I think he's also Perry Mason on HBO, so he probably has some sort of overall deal with HBO right now. But he's great in this. Like, I didn't know. You couldn't even tell it was him at all. So he's just chewing up the scenery, big Shakespearean performance for his villain. So as he's explaining to the little girl, like, I own you and you and I together are going to get this, gremlin and we're going to do evil things with it, you can see the hint of green magic in his eyes. There's a lot of green in this show. His name is Riley Green. There's the Jade Valley, the Mogwais, when they turn bad, they turn green. I think that's what they're getting at. But yeah, there's a real heavy, like, green for bad, maybe green for envy. I don't know. But yeah, the evil magic appears to have a green tint to it. Okay, so when last we left Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai, the family unit was together. They were in possession of a Mogwai, although we're not even 10 minutes into it. They'd already screwed that up and gotten it wet, so there's 4 more plus the original. So the family itself is in possession of a bunch of Mogwai. Some bad guys know the Mogwais are out there, and they kind of have a lead on where they are. So when they take the Mogwai in back to kind of get them boxed up for the night, our bad guys come bursting in through the front door. We've got our evil emperor, Riley Green, which is a weird name for a villain. But Riley Green, he's got evil magic. He's got green magic, I tell you. And then he's got his usual group of thugs and henchmen. And then he's got this little girl with him, Elle. Elle is a street urchin. She has some sort of debt to him. They don't really say what that debt is, but she's kind of got this Han Solo thing to her where you can tell she's conflicted. She's like 70% good, 30% bad, but if she could get that debt paid off, it could get to maybe be like 90-10, She's trying to get to be back to good. So when the bad guys burst in, only person in the shop is Grandpa. Everybody else is in back. So Grandpa realizes he's in trouble and he's being overpowered by this gang of thugs, and he looks like Charles Bronson in Death Wish. He's gonna straight up reach underneath the counter and pull out, bam! That's right, the drum from Karate Kid 2. I know, I couldn't believe it either. As soon as I saw it, I was like, this show's kind of winning me over. So immediately Grandpa starts to spin it and make it turn into a magical device. You see kind of this magic coming off of it. So Riley Green, the villain, then puts his two pinkies crisscrossed and plays an invisible video game controller like freaking Lo Pan from Big Trouble in Little China. Which, quick reminder, Grandpa is played by James Hong, who is Lo Pan from Big Trouble in Little China. And the two of them have their magic duel within the family's urgent care facility or whatever it is they're running there. And at that point, Grandpa gets turned into an energy ball and Riley Green swallows him. And I loved it. Because Darth Vader hits Obi-Wan Kenobi and he turns into a pile of clothes. At no point does Darth Vader just go over and swallow the Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the reason I mentioned that character specifically is because that's what we've got here. The Grandpa is working as Sam's mentor. So once Sam sees that, Grandpa has been murdered by the evil villain, then we've got a villain established. It's you get your mentor killed by your rival kind of thing. So this is good storytelling, and it's also good scary kid stuff. For kid horror, I don't think you need gruesome cuts and blood and grossness or whatever that makes people want to throw up. You need ideas that are scary. I swallowed your grandpa's existence. Jesus, what's wrong with you people? So yeah, this is some real good class, kind of scary, otherworldly concepts that I like. It made me sit up in my seat. This show's getting better. So at this point, the father is watching all this, and the family sees a bunch of it, and the father decides, okay, this is bad. You guys need to go away or need to run. So he blocks the door while the mom and the son gather up the gremlins and go running. They got Gizmo in the adventure backpack thing, and they put the 4 other gremlins in kind of this big footlocker deal. And trying to carry that through the city streets is real hard, and they eventually settle behind a building in an alleyway. In the alleyway, they do kind of a hide the baby thing here. And the mom says, all right, I'm going to run out there and try to lead the bad guys in a different direction. So now at this point, Sam comes to the realization his grandpa's been devoured. His dad has had who knows what happened to him when he was trying to hold the door. And now the mom is abandoning him to run off and try to lead them astray. So he's alone in the world at this point. And the Mogwai senses his sadness, and the two of them cuddle up together. So Gizmo and him are hiding in an alley underneath some boards, and they take a nap. And that's when the bad gremlins decide to strike. They break out of their little containment footlocker box thing, and they go out causing menace in the streets. First thing they do is hit a 24-hour dumpling shop, as you have in 1920. But they go in there and they cause all this havoc. It's reminiscent of the bar scene or maybe the theater or whatever. But they usually just, typical gremlin havoc. However, I would like to point out, a bunch of bright lights in this scene. And this also establishes that the gremlins are bad before they turn green. I always wanted the impression that they were just kind of like children, they're little sweet, cuddly, small things, and then eventually they kind of grow into teenagers where they're pissed off and angry and they're covered in weird sores and stuff. So these gross effers with their snot and everything, that's the villainous form. But it's no, apparently the gremlins are like people. In general, they're usually problem causers, but every now and then there's a truly good one. And that's how Gizmo is. He's good of his own volition, as where the other ones are just up to no good. But when they eat after midnight, they get stronger. That's the lore I guess I didn't understand. I thought it was eating after midnight made them more evil, but no, it just makes them stronger because they're in a bigger, tougher teenager form, whatever. So the gremlins go in, they run around, they cause all this havoc with inside the dumpling shop, and you can see a clock says it's 12:15 or something. It's absurd. We then cut to the Green Trading Company, and of course he works in a giant industrial factory because that's what villains do. They work, they're polluting. You have to do your villainous stuff, but you also have to pollute, all right? You have your fingers in many evil pots at once. All right, so apparently when Riley Green swallowed Grandpa, he gained all of his knowledge, so he knew which books of maps and things to take with when they left his house. So Riley Green is over here learning all of Grandpa's knowledge. So everything Grandpa knows about the Mogwai, he now knows. So then we cut back to Sam waking up to realize that the other gremlins are gone. So him and Gizmo go out running the town looking for the gremlins. And they see a dumpling shop where everybody's running out and fleeing. And the guy says, "Hey, you hired me to kill rats. I don't know what those are." And they kind of, Gizmo and Sam give each other the look and they go running inside there. And sure enough, it looks like Aliens 2. You know, you've got like a bunch of eggs in there and they're all slimy and gross. And Gizmo kind of gives them a, uh-oh. So just as Sam and Gizmo are trying to figure out what to do, the door opens and here's Riley and Elle. Right on time. This bad guy has the best timing ever. So the bad guy and Sam have an exchange where Sam explains, you know, this is Gizmo. And the bad guy says, "Oh, you gave it a name." And he says, "Of course I did. He's not a thing to be owned. He's a living, breathing thing." So just as Riley is rolling his eyes at how dumb it is for that thing to be named Gizmo, he gets clocked in the head by Elle with a wok. There's a sentence I never really thought I'd say. So Sam and her escape and flee to an alley. So she explains to Sam that she doesn't really want to be evil, but she has to be evil because she has this debt to pay. So why don't they try to return the Mogwai to the Valley of Jade? And when they do, some of the treasures and riches that are there she can have, and then she can use that then to stay ahead of Riley Green for the rest of her life. You know, so it's the total Han Solo, Jabba the Hutt story, which is cool. Right now, if you're going to steal from things, steal from Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. All right, those are good stories to steal from. So his response is, "Look, because of you, my grandpa got swallowed, and who knows what happened to my mom and my dad, so I don't trust you at all." She explains to them Riley has them captured in this like magic prison cell thing, and she can use her little street people army to get a message to them to let them know that he's okay and that they're going to go return that Mogwai. Which I imagine as a parent, on one hand, you're happy to get the note that your child is still in fact alive because you had to be worrying at this point. But it's also like, by the way, I'm headed off to a secluded mountainous region with this homeless girl I met 5 minutes ago who used to be evil but says she's cool now. And we're going to take this little quick multiplying monster thing back to its home country before it destroys everything. By the way, I'd like to remind you I'm a child. Love you. Bye. So we see the kids hop on, you know, they have one more encounter with the bad guys and they escape them. They hop a train off to some other city, and that's where the next episode will take us. But just like the last episode, when you think everything is about to be over, there's one last little button shot. In this, we see Riley Green wake up from his concussion from a walk, and he realizes that he's in a room full of Mogwai eggs that are now hatching into evil gremlins. Episode 3 pretty much begins where Episode 2 ends off. Riley Green and his henchmen have stumbled upon the 24-hour dumpling shop where the gremlins have eaten past midnight. So they're in there trying to corral these green monsters to have them be part of their army to take over the world. You know, as one does. And the next thing you know, Stoogey McSpyface comes running in and snitches off a bunch of exposition. And he's like, "Oh, Elle and Gizmo and Sam are on top of a train and they're off to the Ghost City to go to the Jade Valley to return Gizmo to his home." And Riley Green's like, "Fool, I don't care. I already got an army of gremlins. What do I need that little furry wussy one for? And I don't care about that girl. I'll catch up with her some other day to have her pay me back." And then he gives an evil laugh and we go into the opening intro. Previously, I had said that the intro wasn't all that memorable. It's not. It's just that they push into the old curio shop where Wing lives. But I take that back on this episode because I noticed it's about 15 seconds of synthesized, remixed traditional Gremlins theme. So a good ringtone and or text alert, you know, always thinking. All right, the show starts. We're on the train where Elle and Sam are. And Sam, looking out the train window, says, "Isn't that a beautiful view?" And Elle says, "Yeah, if you're into rocks." And Sam says, "Boy, am I. Geology's like a good novel that never ends." So A, you know, Team Sam, and B, pass that joint. And then at that point, the ticket taker for the train pops up.
"Tickets, please."
Realizing they don't have any money for tickets, Elle does what she does and pickpockets everybody on the train. And then some creepy dude who's supposed to stay like 500 feet away from schools kind of spies what she's doing as she pays for a first-class ticket. So Sam gets mad at Elle for still being a criminal because he thought she'd changed into a good guy now that she went off on this adventure with him, but no dice, she's still evil. So Sam goes off and tries to earn some money by shining shoes and offering to give haircuts and nose hair trimmings. While he's out doing that, Gizmo and Elle take a nap. Gizmo notices some weird nightmare monster stalking him in his sleep. And when he tries to tell Elle, she blows him off like it was just a nightmare. So Gizmo's already starting to get annoyed with her. So while Sam's out trying to make a quick buck giving shoe shines, he runs into the man with the Children of the Corn hat. The dude's like, yeah, I'll take a shoe shine. And by the way, I'm a train cop. I saw you guys stealing. So Sam immediately freaks out and gets scared, and he's like, look, I know it wasn't you, kid. It's your friend who you're with. She looks like a real pro. You're clearly an amateur at this. And I also saw you had some sort of exotic pet with you, so I don't know why you would let someone who's clearly a criminal babysit your exotic pet. And Sam's like, you know what? You're right. And he quick goes running back to the bedroom where Elle and Gizmo were sleeping, and they're gone. So then we see Elle and Gizmo going through a walk through some sort of storage area. So then Sam, with suspicion in his eyes, kind of sees her walking around with his Mogwai, and he's like, hey, where are you going with that thing? And she's like, well, we're sort of scared. There's a monster back there. And he's like, oh, you weren't trying to run off with this, were you? She's like, no. And he's like, well, why don't you let me hold it? And that's when Gizmo looks down and notices goat feet. I was like, oh yeah, now we're talking. By God, business just picked up. So Elle immediately points the business end of an umbrella at Sam, and he's like, what's your problem? But then Sam explains, no, it's me. You know, she's like, how did we meet? And he explains at the circus. So she knows it's him. It's all good. So she agrees to give the Mogwai over, even though 2 seconds ago she was just afraid of him. But she agrees to give the Mogwai back over to him, and then Sam immediately hands the Gizmo over to the train cop. And the train cop's like, thank you. And we get our monster of the week. He immediately shoots a bunch of sharp spikes out of his back and pins Sam and Elle up against the wall. And he explains he's been waiting all this time trapped on this train as a monster, and now he's finally going to get his chance to do what he's always wanted to do. Eat a Mogwai. After some dramatic music that plays us into a commercial, we cut back to Riley Green at his place. And he's got all the evil Mogwais corralled, and he's got his henchmen around. And he explains that in the books he's read, he's learned that if you eat a Mogwai, you become immortal. So this is the first time we've had some sort of new storytelling introduced. There's some stuff in the other episodes where they explain that eating after midnight just makes the Mogwai stronger, not more evil or anything. It's just bigger and more powerful. So in this one, we're establishing that if you eat a Mogwai, you get to live forever. So apparently Mogwai are like the old meme that was going around about lobsters, where if nothing murders them or they don't have some accident happen, that they'll just live forever. So that's not true anyways. But they will live for a long time. They're like turtles or something. So that's how this Mogwai deal is. They live forever if nothing kills them. So if you eat a Mogwai, you become immortal. So then Riley Green uses his magic to bring out one of the Mogwai, and he's going to swallow it whole as he does. And then we cut back to this monster known as Odd Odd. He's some sort of actor who's also been cursed, so now he's a shapeshifter. So he thinks the best way to break this curse is to become immortal by eating the Mogwai. But he explains that it has to be a Mogwai that hasn't eaten before midnight. It has to be in its furry state. So then at that point, we immediately cut back to Riley Green after swallowing the Mogwai, and he starts to get violently ill. And at this point, I'm kind of wowed a bit, because this, as far as storytelling goes, is rather awesome. This is the thing where the bad guys love to just explain how smart they are to the good guy, like, I've finally captured you and I've got you tied to a chair and now I'm going to explain to you my plan. So this is two bad guys explaining their evil philosophy and what they're going to do. In this, they use as a really cool storytelling device where the two villains are both kind of going on and on about their brilliant plans, and we cut back and forth to aid and undercut what is being said in each version of the story. And I was trying to think if I'd ever seen that before in film or television. It's a really smart way to tell exposition of we got to move this story along, but so we'll have both bad guys give their own little individual speeches that cross-cut. And then I thought of, you know what it reminds me of is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when they're going to get the goblet or the Holy Grail out of the end, and they have to go through the 3 challenges of the Knights Templar or whatever the hell it is. So they cut to Harrison Ford doing the tasks, but then they also cut back to Sean Connery saying, oh, but Jehovah's spelled with an I or whatever. And so that's cool that they, kind of repurposed that trick of storytelling from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? So Riley Green goes ahead and vomits out this gremlin, and he's a steaming pile of gremlin goo. And then as we cut back to Odd explaining how he's, finally going to be free from this prison he's been in, and how he was trapped in this curse, and, just bad guy exposition. Gizmo figures out a way to escape through an air vent. So then Odd goes chasing after him, and they have to go up on top of the train. And you're damn right they have to go up on top of the train. As soon as I saw this old school train, I was like, if we're not on top of that train having some sort of duel or fist fight, if somebody doesn't fall off the side of the train and dangle, maybe while the train's even going over like a long bridge or whatever, you know how train fights happen. So as soon as I saw this episode, I was like, we better be getting a fight on top of this train. And here we are. So it's giving me what I want. I'm happy about that. Good job, Gremlins. So then we cut to Sam, and we see him with one of the family's magical books, and he explains how there's a potion in there that'll get rid of any shape-shifting curse. So this is kind of interesting that Sam is like the magical science guy to solve problems. He's got like the ultimate little book of spells to get them out of whatever dangers they have. It's a good writing device to get them out of any scary problem they need. Sam's technically a wizard. So then we see Elle doing her pickpocket bit where she can steal anything and gathers up all the ingredients that Sam will need to make his magic elixir to turn Odd back into a person. Transcribe that sentence. Sheesh. So then we cut back to outside where Odd and Gizmo are having it out. Gizmo can't be out in the hot sun, so he's underneath sort of a vent cover, and he's got this like 1960s space-age stewardess outfit on where he's running around, and Odd's up there basically playing whack-a-mole, trying to figure out which one is him and which one is a regular vent. So, Gizmo looks like a gopher or a mole, so that makes sense. It's a funny bit of business, I guess. Sure. And then Sam and Elle get up there, and we get the classic people dueling on top of a train. I told you this is what I wanted. And what happens next? Sam and the elixir get knocked off onto the side of the train, and Sam almost dies because he's hanging off the side of a train going over a bridge. Thank you. So hard to please me? No. Unfortunately, Sam loses the elixir because we have to have the all is lost moment. But as Sam is pulling himself back up to safety on top of the train, Elle realizes from the shadow that Odd is actually a little person pretending to be a big person because he's an actor, a shapeshifter or whatever. So, good little metaphor for children about like how bullies are actually small people and the little bit of storytelling they do in this, or the message telling they do in this show, is pretty good writing. It's not heavy-handed, it's subtle. So then Elle just straight up goes and punches the bully in the nose, or beats him over the head with a parasol, as the case may be. And just like a video game boss, one hit he gets smaller, second hit he gets even smaller, third hit he gets even smaller. And then Gizmo goes over and gives him a good whack because he was going to try to eat him. So then we cut to Riley Green loading up his big evil yacht. Of course, always on the pollutant tip. That's what I like about him. I mentioned this before. He's doing many evil deeds at once. And we see he's bringing Mama and Papa Wing along. He's got them in his little magical prison he keeps them in. And he explains to them that we're going to have to go get Sam because if I'm going to be immortal, I need a gremlin that hasn't eaten before midnight, a pre-pubescent Mogwai, whatever the hell you want to call it. So she immediately says,
he's got a 2-day head start on you, which is more than he needs. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again.
Right? I mean, I appreciate homage, and they're being subtle about it, but at that point I was like, I got your nose. So then we cut back to the train, and we see Sam and Elle having a conversation, and he explains to her, look, I'm sorry I doubted you. You've been on my side from the beginning, and I know you do what you do that I don't agree with, but you've never done me wrong, and it was wrong of me to think that you would have stolen Gizmo, so I apologize. And she kind of looks at him, and she's like really appreciates that this dude, is seeing her for her, and it's kind of a nice tender moment where they do the cartoon big eye, glassy eye thing. And he says, you know what, if you want to hold Gizmo, you hold Gizmo, and hands her back to her. And she reaches down and pulls out the pin in between the two train cars and ditches him. And it ends on like that classic betrayal moment for this episode. So good writing. I explained in one of the early episodes you could tell Elle was going to always straddle that line of being evil because that's a good catalyst for the show. If the show gets boring, we can always turn to Elle up to some shenanigans to get us into trouble. Right, entitled Don't Drink the Tea. The episode opens with Elle and her ill-gotten Mogwai strolling across the beautiful countryside. The whole time Gizmo just cursing her out. It's absurd. It's mildly cute that he's so mad that she screwed over Sam. It was a cheap move and he's not happy about it. But there's no such thing as like a Mogwai Amber Alert in 1920 Shanghai. So the two of them were on their way to the Ghost City because that's the key to the Valley of Jade. But it's just the key. We don't know what that means. Elle especially doesn't know what that means. So she pretty much needs Sam at some point back. So I don't know what the heck she thinks she's doing. And as Elle and Gizmo are arguing about their various differences and how things should be handled, it starts to rain. And they realize they have bigger problems. They look off in the distance and they see the Stormy Night Haunted House, the classic storytelling device. So they're going to go up to the old dark house and we're going to get this week's episode going. So Elle and Gizmo make their way out of the rain and get up to this big building, which turns out to be a hotel. Once they get inside, they meet this woman, Meng Po, but she's clearly up to something. Everybody else in the place is kind of half out of it, dazed under a bit of a spell. Elle explains, "Man, I got robbed by bandits out in the rain, and they took all my money. I'm never going to be able to pay you." And Meng Po says, "Don't worry about it. I accept hugs as payment." And gives her a big hug. Meng Po says, "You know what's going to warm you up and make you feel better? Some of my special house specialty tea to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival." And we cut to a close-up of Elle's face, and she's like, "I hate the Mid-Autumn Festival." So that's right, plot development. And since Meng Po's really pushing the tea a little too hard, Elle becomes suspicious. You know, she's got street smart, she knows. So she does the old bit where she dumps it on the plant, and the plant dies a horrible death. Once Meng Po realizes that Elle isn't now zombied out like she's supposed to be, we see her kind of give the low-angled, drastic, scary face look. And those dramatic moments always mean commercial break. So we come back from the little miniature commercial breaks, and on HBO there is no commercial. This is going to be on Cartoon Channel's Acme Night. That's what it was. I mentioned it in a different episode. So I don't know how much longer after the month that it's going to take for these to come out will it end up on Cartoon Network, but there, I answered the question from a couple episodes ago. It's on Acme Night. Anyway, so there's the hard cut away from the dramatic moment, and we got Sam in the rain. And he's clearly pissed. He's talking about what his plan is when he catches up with Elle. So you see him counting it off. Like, first, I'm going to meet up with Gizmo and I'm going to tell him I'm sorry I let that evil lady kidnap him. And then second, I'm going to give Gizmo a big hug. And then second, I'm going to stick that parasol up Elle's. Anyways, and just as Sam is plotting his revenge Kill Bill style, he looks off in the stormy distance and he sees the old dark house. We immediately cut to a picture of Riley Green's boat floating in what appears to be a sea of tea. And I'm also shout out again to Riley Green's smokestacks. My man stays polluting. I respect that about him. He's awful on so many levels. And inside Riley Green's boat, we see Mama and Papa Wing trapped in their little magical prison cell. And Mama Wing breaks down exactly how she's gonna first see Sam and apologize that this has all happened. Second, give him a big, huge hug. And third, shove Elle's parasol up Riley Green there. So you can see that, you know, the way they do things runs in the family. So then we cut back to the haunted hotel and we see Elle out snooping around. And she bumps into one of the guests staying there and the dude's like, "Hey, what's up? I'm so glad you're here, man. I just got here today and I'm the only other teenager here and it feels weird, you know. I'm 15, but people think I'm 17. Don't tell anybody, you know, that I'm not as old as I say I am." She's looking at this mono-browed, gray-haired dude like, "Oh, 15, huh?" Like, you know, dude must have picked up cigarettes early. And at that moment, boom, the door gets kicked in and here's Sam and he's ready to rumble, baby. As much as Sam could ever be ready to rumble. And before he can even get out of the raindrops, Meng Po is hugging on him and kissing him and calling him cutie mouth. Yikes, welcome to prison. She's like, "Hey man, you look cold and wet. Want some of this tea? This tea's on fire. It's the house special. And get some of this purple tea. What can I do for you? Tea? Can I have some tea? By the way, I'm Meng Po. Have some tea." So he has a big slurp of the tea and immediately becomes a zombie. So another weird thing that comes after the tea is this weird like purple poltergeist ghost monster thing comes floating out of him, and it you know, spreads out in kind of this purple haze, and you can see that person's history or their, you know, backstory. It's a good way to do exposition. We see that, you know, some of Sam's story, and she tells Sam like, "Oh, you've experienced a lot for someone your age." And so we see the purple ghost, you know, of their memories kind of float up and out of the building, and bonus points for Ghostbusters imagery. And then when we see the floating haze up above, we notice those people's memories floating around in there. And we see my man with the one eyebrow when he was young, 15 like he thinks he is. And after we kind of see just quick glimpses of the people in the hotel's backstories. But then we cut back to Meng Po and she's giving Sam some of the crazy tea. And she's like, "How about if you have another cup of tea and, you know, you can do some chores?" And Sam's like, "Yeah, I'd love to do some chores." So Sam's doing his chores out in the barn and Gizmo sees him and he's like, "My God, I've been been missing my dude. I got kidnapped, and there he is. So he runs up and gives Sam a big hug. And Sam's like, well, aren't you a cute little cat dog? And Gizmo's like, you don't remember me? And you can see like genuine heartbreak like on Gizmo's little face. It's good cartoon acting. At that moment, Elle comes over and picks up Gizmo and realizes that Sam is gone on the scissor, right? So since his memory isn't there anymore, she knows he's not going to murder her with the parasol anymore because he doesn't remember anything. He's like, oh, hey, who are you? I just got here. It's nice to have a friend, etc., etc. So he goes off to do some more chores around the place, and Elle and Gizmo try to brainstorm on what the heck they're going to do. So they decide he must have his knowledge of like potions and elixirs and his whole wizard thing he does. They think that must probably still be in his memory somewhere. So let's get him off into the ingredients room and see if his memory starts to come back, or maybe he can figure out a way to cure himself, So Elle and Gizmo lure Sam into the ingredients room. So Sam's like going through all the stuff that the different herbs and spices will do. And at that time, he pulls down a jar full of purple nugs, and we get a little mini close-up on it. And he's like, these ones make you forget. And I immediately had to take back my compliment I gave this show like 2 or 3 episodes ago, where I was like, they don't mix in a lot of like stupid humor like 420 and 69, like stuff that's just lazy. And here they are, they're basically mixing in a 420 joke. So, oh, damn you. So Elle says, well, do you know of a potion you can mix up that makes people remember? So he's like, no, but I can make a potion or a cure for getting rid of a curse on someone's memory. And she's like, oh, well, you should whip some of that up. So Sam does, and she immediately goes to blow it into his face. And then she remembers that he's pretty much going to murder her the second he goes back to being Sam, because he remembers that she stole his Mogwai and left him for dead on the back of a train in the middle of nowhere. And she looks into his eyes, and he says something about how, I think you're cool. She's like, you do? He's like, yeah. She's like, oh. So she can't let him go back to being normal. She has to keep him on the drugs, man. She likes him this way better. So Sam kind of wanders out of the room, and Elle's standing there all confused, and Meng Po pops out like jump scare style and starts chasing her around. And then we see Gizmo alone with Sam, and he blows some of the magical powder into Sam's face. And Sam immediately turns back into Sam and gives Gizmo like this big, huge hug. And he's like, oh, I missed you so much. And it's like this nice, touching moment. It's sweet. And then we cut back to Meng Po chasing Elle around Scooby-Doo style through the hotel, and out of nowhere the henchmen pop up and they trap Elle. And then we cut back to Riley Green's boat, and we see Sam's parents and the Gremlins both locked in their little magical prison cells Riley's got them in. And Riley comes in, and he's got one of Grandpa's old magical books, and in there's a picture where he sees that if you get a Mogwai wet, it will reproduce. So Riley Green has his henchman, Sebastian, go over and put his arm inside the gremlin cage and put a little bit of water on the nose of one of the gremlins. I believe that one's name is Snout. Of course, Snout's nose starts to bubble up, and we get bing, 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 Ricochet Rabbit, and there's 4 more Mogwai there. So Riley Green kind of announces to his henchmen, like, I won't even need you guys anymore. Look at this new army I can build. And you can see the henchmen's face get all sad, like they're being phased out of their jobs. Job security in the henchman business is hard. And just at that moment, Sebastian gets his arm bitten. By the way, this henchman with the big pork chop sideburns here, he's been around. He never says anything. There's one part in one of the episodes where the Mogwai bites his finger off and then holds it like a cigar. Other than that, he's had very little to do. This henchman is being voiced by Zach Galligan. So I've been trying to figure out who he's going to play this whole time. I'm like, I know Zach Galligan's one of the voices in this. I would like to know, who he is. He has one little line in this part where he says something to Riley, and Riley says, well, that doesn't matter what you think. I'm the boss, and you're henchman number 2, and don't you dare humanize yourself to me by telling me your name. And as they're ushering out henchman number 1, Sebastian, with his bitten arm, the parents say, hey, we're doctors, right? So rather than throw Sebastian overboard, he's like, okay, yeah, I agree to let you out to do medical work on him. We then cut back to Elle being held hostage by Meng Po's little, zombie army. So they force feed her the tea, and immediately, her purple spirit comes shooting out of her, and we see her memory. So then we see cute little adorable baby Elle and her parents walking around the Mid-Autumn Festival. Uh-oh, Elle hates the Mid-Autumn Festival. So Elle's father points out some rich mark for Elle to go do her amazing pickpocket routine on. She's got this skill since a young age. And the guy Elle's dad points at is Riley Green. And Riley's no chump, so he catches her. And as soon as she's been caught, Elle looks to her parents, and you can see the mom kind of reach out like she wants to go help. And the dad pull her back, and then we look again, and they're gone. So Riley explains to Elle, looks like you've been abandoned. And This is the first time in my life I've ever repurposed somebody's old trash. So that's the debt she owes. She tried to steal but didn't get away with it. So that sounds like a pretty loose number right there. I mean, can we get some paperwork on this? Can I get it notarized? So when we see that Elle's parents were criminals and raised her bad and then they abandoned her the second they got her into trouble, we see Sam and Gizmo soaking up her backstory, and they look traumatized. They, understand what makes Elle tick even more. And then we cut to a close-up of Elle, and she explains, I heard the next year at the Mid-Autumn Festival, my parents went and tried to steal floating lanterns. But since they didn't have a kid weighing them down, they ended up stealing so many lanterns so fast that they floated away. And sometimes in the night sky, you can hear their screams, but their bodies were never recovered. So keep an eye out for Elle's parents to be turning up somewhere down the road in the next month. So then we cut to a chandelier that Meng Po mentioned in passing earlier, a Chekhov's chandelier. We see Gizmo shimmying down this chandelier, and he's pouring this dust all over the top of the food everybody's going to eat for the Mid-Autumn Festivals. So then he rings the gong, and everybody forgets that they're holding Elle hostage and turn around and just goes and starts eating. And as soon as they eat, we see all the swirling memories over the top of the evil pagoda come pouring in the windows and back into the people. And then Sam runs over to Elle, and he blows a handful of the blue powder into her face, and she has this real awesome animation moment where all her memories come back. It's super cool. And then he unties her, and she's like, you remember me, but you're not going to murder me? And he's like, no, I know you come from bad background, and together maybe we'll become friends and you'll learn how to not be such an ass, right? And that's another subtle storytelling in this. I like that they teach Elle and they teach children, you don't betray your friends because it's more valuable to have friends than whatever you would steal. They're not beating you over the head with the message, but they at the same time, convey nice little family values or whatever. I don't know. So the people who were used to be zombied now have Meng Po tied down, and they're going to feed her the tea and teach her a lesson. And at that point, Elle jumps up on the table, and he says, no, don't do that. It's better that she has to live with her memories. That if she could just forget, she won't remember that she had a whole bunch of people who cared about her and were in her place, but now they're gone. And they're like, yeah, that's deep, man. That's deep. Let's punish her that way. That makes sense. And she's like, no, don't do that. That's the worst ever. And then Elle kind of turns back and looks at her, and she's, soaks in the lesson she's learned about friendship and not betraying people and everything. And as they slowly walk out the door and leave Meng Po on her own, and then we see Sam and Elle, and they're being all cute together, and they're on their way off on their little Hope and Crosby road trip adventure movie they're back on. Then, as per usual, the show has one little button at the end where we see Riley Green's boat floating in the harbor. And look at the Gremlins imagery now on the boat. So we cut to the inside, and we see the boss Gremlin explaining to the other Gremlins how they're going to escape. And the show ends with the Gremlins now loose. So I liked it. It was good. It was about as good as the third episode. They've all been enjoyable.
Okay, so episode 5 picks up pretty much where episode 4 left off. The converted gremlins have escaped from their magical prison cell and are up in the air vents. Our guy henchman number 2, who's played by Zach Galligan, who we figured out last week, they were keeping his name secret on Wikipedia and IMDb and stuff, so last week was the first week we figured out who he is, and he had very little to say last week, and then this week they're giving him little bits and more to say, so I like to see that he's coming up. Good for him. Anyways, he's explaining how many gremlins have escaped to the boss, except that accounting is all wrong, because the gremlins have found and fallen into one of them their indoor plumbing commodes you hear about. Fancy. Anyways, they start breeding like Mormons, and next thing you know, we got an army of them. Then we cut to Sam and Elle walking through the scary forest. It's actually called that. Good name. Sam's been reading out of one of Grandpa's magical handwritten journals that he keeps. I've been calling those the Gremlinomicon. He uses them to solve most of their problems. Here we're using it as a map to figure out how to find the ghost city, which will then be the key to unlocking the Valley of Jade. Classic fantasy gibberish. During all this, a bandit jumps out. He tells them, give me your money and everything you got, including your toothbrushes. Sam immediately hands over everything as the bandit says. Elle not only disarms the bandit, she has time to give a monologue about how bandits are rats. No criminal with any actual talent would need to scare people with something like a knife. Except Elle's thoughts on crime are rather irrelevant because this is all just a setup to see our bandit friend, Plot Point, get attacked by some sort of zombies from outside of the scary woods. The weird ancient Chinese zombie punches a hole straight into our guy Plot Point, and other zombies come running out of the woods as Plot Point stands up and is now one of them. A few minutes earlier, Sam had mentioned that Grandpa's advice was either to stab or run. Anything in between was useless. The kids freak out and they just start taking off. So when the zombies start cornering in on our heroes, they look up and they see the cabin that the witch from Pumpkinhead lives in.
No, they just look up and they see this scary cabin up in the woods. This is your classic Night of the Living Dead thing, right? You know, if you're being attacked by zombies, you got to go get in a cabin that's easy to punch through the walls in. That's part of the whole experience. So Elle pulls out the knife and starts stabbing zombies, as Sam instructed her to do. But it doesn't work at all. They pop right back up. So Sam and Elle run up to the cabin. Elle grabs an axe, busts the door open, and we get some great Evil Dead type imagery. And then the creepy shark-toothed zombies chase them up to the door and start busting through the wood as Sam and Elle can't figure out what to do. So of course we go to commercial, but since we're on HBO, we don't have the commercials, and we cut straight to Riley Green's diesel yacht. This thing is currently being overrun by gremlins, as I stated at the beginning, but the captain of the ship is unaware of this apparently, because the main lead gremlin, Claw, sneaks up behind him through the air vent and straight murders him. Like, I'm not joking, like, oh, he murdered him. No, I mean, like, he murders him. We see his corpse laying on the ground as Claw picks up the captain hat, and he's the captain now. So, within the last, 3 minutes, we've seen Elle repeatedly stab a zombie in the chest over and over again with an old rusty fishing knife. And now we've seen a captain murdered by this gremlin, choked to death. So this is TV PG, but maybe too scary for kids. I mean, I know most people's kids are cool and there is no blood and gore, but there's a lot of, stabbing and axes and just whoa, right? So, something to think about. Although, personally, I'm digging it, but I'm grown. I'm not TV PG. Well, grown-ish. So now that Claw is in charge of Riley Green's Jay-Z Big Pimpin' Yacht, we cut to the ancient Chinese zombies attacking the wooden cabin hidden in the middle of the scary forest. Copyright, trademark. Elle, Gizmo, and Sam are holding back the door, and we get the cool light beams banging through like in Frailty or Evil Dead. And then when the zombies start winning and overcoming them, they start backing away, and Elle falls through a hole in the floor. Sam and Gizmo see her, and they see she's okay, so they jump down there to be with her. Here we meet Radish. Radish is a kid who's been hiding from the zombies and living down in this basement, and there's a bunch of carrots everywhere, so clearly that's what he's been living on. And he's not quite right in the head. We can tell that after we've known him for 2 seconds. He introduces us to his best friend, a radish named Theodore. So the boy is Radish and the radish is Theodore. Got it? The radish is obviously like a Wilson. So it takes Elle, Sam, and Gizmo approximately 2 seconds to figure out that Radish is off his rocker. But what are they going to do? It's better than the zombies. The zombies overcome the cabin's virtually non-existent defense system and burst through the door. Suddenly the zombies overtake the cabin one hop at a time. One of the things that makes these zombies slightly different from all other zombies we've seen in the past is they jump one hop at a time, kind of like a bunny rabbit or Cubert. So it gives them a little bit of an interesting flair to who they are and what they're doing. The problem is the cabin's floorboards are made of old rickety wood, and a bunch of people jumping around on it are getting ready to break through and end up downstairs with Sam, Elle, Radish, and Theodore. So since a bunch of tension have built, we gotta cut away. That's the rule of the show. We see Mom and Pop Wing, who, when we last left them in episode 4, had convinced Riley Green to let them out to do medical work on henchman number 1 who'd been bitten by a Mogwai. So the henchmen were easy to escape from, much like stormtroopers, easily fooled. So we see Ma and Pa Wing skulking around the ship trying to figure out a way to escape, and they end up in Riley's office. Ma Wing explains to Pa Wing, we need to fight magic with magic. See what you can find in here that we can turn into a weapon. While they're doing that, a Mogwai hand reaches down and puts a record needle onto a piece of vinyl that starts playing a slow, eerie song in an empty room. And if you've watched any horror movie in the last 20 years, you know that is terrifying. With a bunch of escalating tension, we cut back to Sam, Elle, and Radish. Radish says that these zombies are called the, air quotes, Shang-Chi. Sorry if I massacred that pronunciation. I've been killing them this whole time. Anyway, so the Shang-Chi. Sam says that when he was little, Grandpa explained to him what the Shang-Chi were. And they cut to a backstory of Grandpa doing one of his little monologues of the monsters of the week. This monster of the week so far is by far the scariest. I'd like to point that out again. Scary, scary, scary. So anyways, Grandpa explains that the Shang-Chi were derived from a bureaucrat who could not think for himself. And when that bureaucrat eventually died, he didn't know where to go after he was dead. So his soul just lived in his body and he became undead. So in the deepest, darkest woods, sometimes a Shang-Chi will live out there, mindless, with no instruction, nowhere to go. So Grandpa explains the way you defeat a Shang-Chi bureaucrat is to show bravery, something they don't have. So you have to walk up to them and put this talisman, which looks like a piece of paper or a receipt, and stick it on their forehead, and that freezes them dead. So the zombies start pounding at the floor, and eventually they break through, and one of them grabs Theodore and runs off. Radish isn't having that for 1 second. He goes bolting out a secret door, and Sam starts writing out talisman. So Elle looks outside, and she sees that Radish is about to be devoured by the zombies that he's out there trying to defeat to get his beloved Theodore back. And Sam thinks about the words that he needs to show bravery. And Sam gets his brave face on, and he goes running out there meaning business. So of course, since the dramatic tension, we cut back to Ma and Pa Wing in the boat. they have the full-on Gremlins scary scene experience. So we just see things getting knocked over, and we know it's there, but we can't see it. Once again, actually scary. So, this is good stuff. This is the horror I've been waiting for. It's even by far the scariest episode so far. So Pa Wing grabs some medicine off a shelf and slams it onto one of the gremlins, and of course it's acid, and we see him melt right before our eyes. Another one they grab and throw up into a ceiling fan, and he gets busted up into a bunch of pieces. Ma Wing then grabs what appears to be a magic wand off a shelf, points it at a gremlin, and blammo! We see a light bolt come out and zap a gremlin into a million pieces. Straight goo, dog. Then we cut back to Radish in the woods, about to be devoured by our pseudo-zombies. And Sam and Elle pop out and distract the zombies and get them to start heading back towards them. In the ruckus and the confusion, Radish and Theodore are reunited, and oh, it's so good. Sam displays the bravery he's supposed to display, and he puts the talisman on one of the bureaucrats' foreheads and freezes him cold. Then a monster pops out behind Elle, and she puts an axe in his chest, over and over and over again. TVPG. But that does nothing, so when he pops back up, Sam has to run over and put a talisman on his forehead to freeze him. Then as the bureaucrat zombies start closing in around Sam and Elle, Radish and Gizmo begin to throw the carrots that are hanging up everywhere at them. Okay, so let's take a quick pause here. We've got Sam, who can defeat the zombies, but it takes a second for him to regenerate his weapon that defeats them. We've got Gizmo and Radish, who are able to stun the zombies, but just for a second. And then we also have Elle, who can stun the zombies for almost a minute or so, except she can't kill them. Sam has to freeze them. Between all that and the way the zombies jump one little space at a time like Q*bert, this all feels like a future video game for like a tablet or your phone, so keep an eye out for that. So now that we've got our fierce foursome to fight the video game zombies and have an adventure, Sam begins brighting out talisman, the other members of the crew begin stunning zombies, and everybody has their hero moment fighting off the bureaucratic Shang-Chi. And after we get a big montage where everybody's working together, all the zombies are defeated, we see our heroes exhausted, and Radish thanks them for their help getting his boy Theodore back, and Sam and Elle give each other a look like, hey, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And they are. They invite Radish to come with them on their journey. Radish gratefully accepts, and before he even has a chance to pack, they're already at the outskirts of Ghost City. So since the show's wrapping up, we have to cut back to a Button scene, and we see Riley Green's yacht completely overrun by the Gremlins. I think poor henchman number 1, Sebastian, walked the plank. Ma and Pa Wing are on their way trying to escape, and Riley Green pops out. Ma Wing takes out the magic wand, and she points it at him, and bzzz. And Riley lets him know the wand of sunlight might be a weapon to a gremlin, but to me it's nothing more than a glorified reading lamp. He does some sort of weird two-fingered fist punch judo magical kung fu move and freezes Ma and Pa Wing in their place, straight Matrix style. He then takes the magical wand of sunlight and begins zapping gremlins like a laser gun, restoring law and order to his gas-guzzling, diesel-polluting yacht. After a bunch of the gremlins have been zapped into goo, Riley announces, "I would like to parley with your leader." Claw comes out with the captain hat on, and Riley points out that since the Mogwai have thrown most of his crew and captain overboard, he needs someone to shepherd him to the Valley of Jade. The Gremlins, however, need the boat. They want to hit the open seas and conquer the world. So the two of them have an agreement. By the way, when we saw the Mogwai throwing the henchmen overboard, one of the things got thrown overboard was a jar with a little gremlin inside it. That's the gremlin left over from when Riley tried to swallow one whole to become immortal, and then he vomited it back up. So that gremlin is essentially hot gremlin vomit in a jar. So, good name for your punk band. So now that Riley and Claw have worked out this agreement, we see the ship sail off into the night, and we cut back and we see my boy Hot Gremlin Vomit floating in a jar in the ocean. The end. Okay, so episode 5 was good. I liked it. Okay, coming right off of episode 5 into episode 6, we start with the kids back on the road to the Ghost City. While the kids are walking, we see Riley Green's big diesel yacht come clunking up along the shoreline. They've both arrived at the Ghost City at pretty much the same time. Tension, am I right? Sam explains to Elle the Ghost City has the key to the Jade Valley in it, but they have no idea what that means. Sam gets all that information from these handwritten books he's gotten. I've been calling them the Gremlinomicon. At this point, the whole group is trying to unlock the secret way to get into the Valley of Jade. Then we see the Mogwai come burning over the hill and tops of buildings and start overrunning the town, doing their Mogwai thing. Pretty much a modern-day version of Johnny Knoxville and the Jackass Gang. Smacking each other in the head and falling down and cracking up. Gizmo leads the group to a big archway that looks fallen down and wrecked and starts breaking out into his Mogwai siren song.
And within the arch to the old school doorway, we see a magical portal to a spirit market. But little does our group know that Snout is hiding behind a rock watching them and comes sneaking up behind them and tries to jump through the portal just as they all go through, but the portal closes right in Snout's face and he can't make it. Our gang, now inside the spirit market, inside the ghost city, walks around and looks at all the amazing sights they see. Neon day-glow ghosts virtually beyond description. Next thing you know, Theodore comes to life and announces he's Theodora. And she starts sashaying her long locks around and she's fabulous. Then, just to add to the jumbled up mishmash of animation characters, a fox comes out and decides he's gonna eat that Mogwai. Another weird ghost that looks like a bantha strikes up a conversation with Gizmo and points him in the direction of this old bar up on the hill where the creator of all things is getting drunk. So let's have a talk here. First of all, this episode's called By God a Drink. This woman whose god is, I believe, played by Sandra Oh. She's so disenchanted with human beings that as soon as she sees Sam and Elle, she kind of snarls at him, and she's happy to see Gizmo. She's got a past relationship with Gizmo. But while they're talking, a bunch of angry ghosts come bursting through the bar door, intent on eating Gizmo and getting that immortality that we keep hearing about. Goddess of all things uses her weird Jedi Sith powers and force pushes all the ghosts out the door so she can get back to drinking. Then we cut back to Snout explaining to Claw and Riley Green how the Gremlin siren song can open up the magic portal. So Riley has all the gremlins out there singing away at the outside of this door to no dice. Riley tells all of them to shut up and realizes one of them has a voice that's on key. So a man here with the cool sideburns is instructed to sing his little heart out or else. He busts out into his little version of the song, and of course it works beautifully. The portal opens up and all the gremlins are able to run into the spirit market and infest the place like roaches. So since the tension is rising, by rule we have to cut away. We see Gizmo and the creator of all things getting caught up, and Gizmo explains that these are my friends, and she doesn't like it one bit. She says, "You let them call you Gizmo? That's not your name." And Gizmo kind of waves her off like, "Shh, leave it be, leave it be." So I'm glad that they're trying to sand out some of the rough edges regarding Gizmo being named Gizmo before Randall Peltzer, the inventor, found him, because that still makes absolutely no sense why he would be named that. So they're saying his name is something bigger and longer and more complicated that sounds like Gizmo, like Chewbacca being Chewie or whatever. She says humans are always up to no good, so they can't go to the Jade Valley, but you can. So Gizmo is sad that they're not going to be able to go along, but he gives his hugs to Sam and to Elle, and at that second, Elle picks Gizmo up and jumps into the portal, trying to steal him and get into the Jade thing. If you remember, Elle's whole mission on this is she wants to go to the Valley of Jade to get a bunch of treasure for herself so she can then live her life avoiding Riley Green. You know, she can move to the other side of the world or whatever. So just as Elle gets her head into the portal and gets a glimpse of the beautiful Jade City and all the little gems and treasures just laying around on the ground, the creator of all things uses her Sith powers to pull back Elle and lift up Sam and her into the sky and start to chastise them in between drinks. The gremlins begin overtaking the spirit market the way the gremlins do, Mogwai-ing it up. One of the Mogwais begins devouring magical potions sitting on an old abandoned cart. Theodora has now found a bunch of magical Radish friends to commiserate with, and Radish comes over and says, "Hey, we need to get out of here." Riley then walks over to the gremlin who's been devouring potions and realizes we now have a smart one that talks, just like in Gremlins 2. Riley then goes over to Captain Claw and refers to him as Mr. Claw, and Claw interrupts and says, Ms. Claw. So Riley took that about as well as I did, and we move on. We cut to God inside the bar, half drunk, slurring at the kids, yelling at him, chewing them out. Reminds me a lot of my step-grandma Sandy. Shout out to her. Anyways, her old drunk ass is yelling at the kids, and Gizmo's had just about enough, so she decides it's time to give exposition. We see the goddess of all things and her brother were the creators of all life on the planet. Her brother didn't believe in humans, she did. So they decided to make a test to test the humans, the Mogwai. She brought Gizmo to life, and he created the rules that the Mogwai have to live by. Don't get them wet, don't let them see bright light or get in the sun, and don't feed them after the point where the moon is highest in the sky. But her brother cursed the Mogwai to spend the first 100 years of their lives as tricksters, which explains earlier why I didn't understand why some of them are evil and some of them are good, and it seemed like only Gizmo was good. The goddess of all creation then gave the Mogwais to the human as a beautiful gift, and before she could even return to the spirit world, they'd already broken all the rules and the Mogwai were running amok and burning everything to the ground. So with total disappointment in humanity, she scoops up all the remaining Mogwais in Gizmo and takes them away to the furry green butthole sitting in the side of the mountain. So then the goddess of creation, no longer having any faith in anything since humanity had let her down, gave up creating altogether and went into the getting drunk business. At this point, we cut to Sam and Elle feeling human guilt. And Gizmo has had just about enough of her putting down his friends, and he starts one of his famous Gizmo curse-outs. And before that ever even gets off the ground, we notice a bunch of Mogwai pouring in through the hole in the ceiling and the damn rubble. So ODB starts snapping her fingers, thinking she's gonna do her old Sith magic bit, and nothing happened. The Mogwai start snapping back at her and laughing and mocking her, and she realizes, uh-oh, I've been poisoned. So just as she crumbles to the ground and realizes she's in trouble, I don't know how you poison God. This show's insane. At that point, Riley Green comes stepping in and he says, you know what? You're gonna open the door to the Valley of Jade, or I'm gonna let you die. Your choice. Dun dun dun, dramatic music. And the show ends for the week. Okay, episode 7 picks up where the cliffhanger of episode 6 left off. Our heroes are trapped inside a bar, inside the spirit market, inside of Ghost City, which is the only way to find the Valley of Jade. Oh boy. So anyway, Riley Green and the evil gremlins are there as well, and he's demanding they hand over Gizmo immediately. Some of the evil gremlins start to pour in the holes in the roof and the rubble like at the end of last episode, but we see Sam fights them off with a match, which can be used as bright light. But a match inside a bar held by a child also means we get the fire scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Anytime there's rising tension, we have to cut away. Here we see this show's version of Brain from Gremlins 2. It's Noggin, who's portrayed by George Takei. He's out there digging through the cart where he found the potion that gave him the ability to speak and understand languages. Now he's got an anti-magic ring. It makes him impervious to all magic. I'm sure that's not important. Anyways, moving on. We see Riley Green's evil crew start to react to the bright light of the fire. Riley's disappointed them because he thought they would be into arson for sure, but I guess not. We then cut back inside the burning bar, and Nua is just being a peach about this. She's a total delight. She's being such a good sport. You can't believe how well she's taken all this. So even the animated camera operator is sick of watching this woman, and they pan right over to Radish, who's hanging out with Theodora and her new friends, the farmers. Now, hold on a second. These are radishes. What does farming look like? Are they planting other radishes? Are they planting humans? Is it a Motel Hell situation? What is going on? So Radish explains this is his new family now, and this is where he taps out of our story. Told you guys, he was totally useless to this whole thing. Anyway, so Riley prefers his gremlin raw rather than cooked, and Riley kicks open the door and turns all the fire in the room into kryptonite using his pinky magic. He immediately notices Elle and Sam and company lurking around behind a table, and he moves it, and what do you know? It's Radish. Riley Green realizes this is nothing more than a speed bump and continues on with his journey. Then we cut to out back of the bar where we see Elle, Sam, Nua, and Gizmo escaping from a wine cellar. Once again, Nua is just being a delight. She has nothing bad to say about human beings. She is being totally supportive of the situation, offering nothing but words of wisdom. Now you may recall, Nua's existence is one of my issues with the previous episode. She was originally presented as the god, not a god. You know, like Odin or Zeus or the god of the Bible or Beyonce. You know, like one of the big ones, not some low-level one that Wonder Woman dispatches of in the first 5 minutes before the credits. So over the course of last episode, she had her agency and power as a god stripped away from her real fast. They Star Trek 5'd her. Anyway, she explains without her magic knife and now being poisoned, she has virtually no magic. So she can't open up the portal to get Gizmo and only Gizmo, get it humans, back to the Valley of Jade. So she points off in the distance to this temple. She says in there we can find the Celestial Administrator and he can open a portal to get Gizmo back home. And up pops one of my other issues I had with the last episode. Those damn cannibalistic foxes. This one in front is such a big deal, they're selling merch. T-shirts now available. Anyways, like everybody else on the show, they're trying to eat Gizmo. And because he smells delicious, they track him down immediately and begin to swarm in on him. Elle realizes they're going way too slow carrying around this Jabba the Hutt butt fake god, so they load her into a fruit cart and take off as fast as they can. So now what you got here is a high-speed cart chase. Not to mention that, if you know the history of fruit carts and car chase sequences, this whole thing is Monty Python level of clever. So to add to the tension, the t-shirt foxes are constantly nipping at their heels, and they're doing the Mad Max thing where they jump up in the air and strike back down on them with axes and spears and stuff. So Sam finds a small bit of oil inside his magic crate, throws it behind him, and spy hunters the cannibalistic foxes chasing them. But it only works for a second. Elle says, "Do you have more traps?" He says, "Just some twine and a little bit of explosives." Explosives? So she reverse fast-pitch softballs one over her shoulder, and kaboom! And we get the Game of Thrones explosion wide shot shot. And because it's a cartoon and this show constantly wavers back and forth on the stakes of things, everybody's okay. However, we have to wait for the dust to literally settle. Elle uses that time to say, "Give me that magic box," and she straps it on, and her and Snake Booty go running off in the distance. We see the cannibalistic t-shirt foxes chasing behind them. Cannibalistic t-shirt foxes, good name for your all-girl rock band. Anyways, we then cut to Sam doing his best Barry Sanders impersonation, holding it high and tight with both hands so defense can't strip it. Sam carries Gizmo through the crowd in the market, and that weird bantha thing and that tall thing that looks like the monster from The Ritual all give him a look and realize we want to eat that Gizmo too. So now the chase is on, coming in this other direction. Sam and Gizmo dip down an alley, and Sam says, "You smell too good, we're never going to get away." So Gizmo looks over and sees an abandoned fish cart. Because he's a fan of The Walking Dead, he knows I can go rub those guts on myself and we can cover up my stench. So he does that, him and Sam go taking off in this fish cart, and now we got 2 carts in the high-speed cart chase. So then we cut back to Elle and Grandma Grumpy Snake Booty being pushed in the cart. And even though she is being pushed in the cart and has nothing to do but just sit there, she still complains. So we get a bit of Driving Miss Daisy as Nua explains why she hates humans. But what's this ahead? Riley and the Gremlin crew waiting on him. So Elle going down a hill decides, "I'm not stopping, I'm plowing right through him." And Riley says, "Cool, you're bringing the Gremlin right to me." And the evil cannibalistic t-shirt foxes, hot on their tail, decide we're getting something to eat no matter what. So everybody goes barreling down this hill at Riley Green, and as the tension mounts and the music mounts and everybody's about to slam into each other, Elle pulls the ripcord on her parasail and it works like air brakes, and just like in Top Gun, they all fly right by. The cannibalistic t-shirt foxes go slamming into the Gremlins, and warriors come out and play yay yay. It's on. We get a big huge rumble and a giant dust up. It looks like a bunch of Tasmanian devils have just rolled into town. Riley, realizing this is going to cost him time in his valuable quest to eat a Mogwai, starts zapping the razor-toothed foxes with his Coke Pinky fingernail magic. As he's cleaning up shop, Elle says, "Love your work, babe. Ciao," and throws him the deuces. So she goes taking off, so then we cut to Sam also on the run carrying Gizmo in that fish cart. But we see the fish cart blink. Sam and Gizmo pull up to the bridge at the base of the temple they're trying to get to, just as Elle and Nua do too. So everybody's excited that they're all together, and they start helping Nua up to the temple and across the bridge, but they forget about Gizmo standing in the fish cart. And before you can say Minox chewing on the power cables, we get roar! Straight up Jaws. So Gizmo bounces around on the teeth of this evil thing, and Elle takes her hot new whip and runs it into the guts of this Laker fan and pushes him over the bridge into the water. Nua, encouraging as ever, points out, "You moron, you just knocked a river spirit back into the river, the source of his power. How stupid could you be?" Can you see how I've fallen in love with her? Of course you can. Next thing you know, the giant catfish is back from a rave and ready to dance. He drops down on Elle and apparently eats her. But before we can actually confirm that death, Nua pops up and uses her last bit of energy to cut through that catfish Sharknado style. And while the audience is marveling at the grossness of an inside of a magical catfish, we look over and see Elle, who appears to be dead. But this is now a fantasy show, so she's only Princess Bride dead, not real dead. So they rush her up to the doors of the temple and begin knocking. There we meet the Celestial Administrator. He has them bring Elle inside, and he does a bit of magical mumbo-jumbo. Sam and him get into an argument like a medical drama. It's kind of cute. And ta-da! Of course, Elle is back. We needed that dramatic beat of loss, but she's here now and everything's okay. Except Nua. She's not okay. Although she does announce that after 1,000 years of hating humans, watching Elle try to save Gizmo was a selfless act, and she believes that some humans are in fact good. So she says it's cool that the kids go with Gizmo to the Valley of Jade after the Celestial Administrator opens up the magical portal. And then Gizmo says, "Aren't you coming?" And she says, "No." And she leans in, and there's a sweet moment of redemption for her where we says, well, at least she's an animal lover. And she turns and heads towards the door. So basically, Han Solo is walking out on that bridge. Gizmo says, "No!" The door closes behind her, and we watch her walk out onto the porch, and she does a bunch of kung fu magical mumbo-jumbo and summons up mystical light. We see this light has power because it blasts Riley and the crew right in the face. Riley returns fire with his magical low pan from Big Trouble in Little China invisible video game controller magic, and the two of them have an Aurora Borealis fight above this bridge. Since tension is at its highest, we cut away. Back inside the temple, the Celestial Administrator is opening a portal, and this is all very Doctor Strange. They ought to send a check to Doctor Strange on this one. So the kids run into the portal, and they pop up ready to freeze to death in a mountainous snowstorm. Just at about the point where they question if they were going to freeze to death or not, Gizmo points out, "Happy green butthole, 9 o'clock, yo." So rather than show children trying to traverse the side of a mountain, we cut back to the magic fight. The Gremlins are somehow losing, because even though drunk and poisoned, she still got angry old bitch strength. However, Noggin earlier in the show had acquired a ring that makes him impervious to magic. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So he's able to walk through the magic fight like it's not even there. Okay, quick reminder.
What you've got here is Chekhov's anti-magic ring being worn by Sulu. Oh, Gremlins, I love you sometimes. Anyways, Noggin runs up and takes a big shark bite right out of the side of Grandma Jerkface. And I winced, she winced, her magic stopped, and the gremlins rained from the sky like it's raining men, hallelujah, every specimen. Riley says, enough of your bad disco references, I'm about to eat this old bag and become extremely powerful. And sure enough, we see her swallowed whole, and Riley lights up with energy from all around the universe as it pours into his body, and he becomes a god. The end. So episode 8 picks up where episode 7 left off. We've arrived at the happy little green butthole, and Gizmo is back home at the Ewok village. This is what the show started with. I thought it was going to be a baby show, and then Gizmo got scooped up by a bird of prey, and this whole adventure started with a circus. So one of the Mogwai Ewoks says, "Hey everybody, look, it's Gizmo!" And I flashed back to the love of my life, Nua, who chewed us out for calling Gizmo Gizmo because no one would call him that. God, she was the worst. So Gizmo introduces Sam and Elle to his Mogwai friends, and before a rousing rendition of Yub Yub breaks out, we cut back to Riley Green finishing his transformation into a demigod. He then informs the Celestial Administrator, "You will be opening up a portal to the Valley of Jade for me." The CA gets kind of sassy with him and says, "Man, I know who you are. You're Riley Green. You're a cheap power swallower, and you act the way you do because you were never hugged, even by your mama." The sticky green gremlins start giggling, and Riley hates being laughed at his expense, so he cuts the Celestial Administrator in half, and we get Guts' point of view. And then Riley hits him with, "Oh yeah? Well, now you can hug yourself." So Riley says, "I don't need you and your stupid temple. I'm a god," and he opens up a portal himself. Now we cut back to Gizmo doing his best C-3PO at the Ewok village and recapping the journey they've been on up until this point. Elle's like, yeah, enough Star Wars references. I came here for treasure. Where is it? She's like, "Can I have this?" And she pulls a jade knife out of the ground and realizes it's the clay knife that Nua used to create things. Dreaming about gold and treasure, she zaps a butterfly that's been bothering her, and it turns into a solid piece of gold. Sam pulls the knife away from her and puts it back into the ground, and Gizmo points out, "Man, we got wealth everywhere," and holds up a dirty rock. Elle's like, "What is this?" Gizmo polishes it for a second, and you see it's a solid piece of jade. The street value of the Mogwai village is infinity monies. So Elle starts rejoicing because she's rich and her life is now about to change. Now realizing that their journey is coming to an end, there's a touching scene where Gizmo pulls an avatar and wipes some sort of magical day-glow flower on their foreheads, and there's a connection now that will be there forever. Then in the distance we see one of the Ewok guards, the Mogwai, get straight punted off the cliff he's standing on, and before I can regain my composure from laughing, Riley Green comes descending from the sky like Zod. He even says, "Kneel before a god." Gizmo's like, "Oh crap, Superman references now?" Sam runs over and grabs the knife of creation and threatens a brand new god with old school god weapons. Riley Green points out, "Fool, I swallowed Grandpa and all his memories, and he doesn't remember you being real confident. So since you're not confident, that knife's not gonna work." And Sam thinks about it, and Elle tells him, "Shoot him! Shoot the knife!" Of course, Sam is too much of a good boy to do that, and now Riley has an all-powerful godlike weapon in addition to his giant growing arsenal of powers. Riley then announces he's gonna eat Gizmo and become immortal and complete this god mission. Ms. Claw says, "Mine!" And for some reason, Riley agrees to that and eats some other random gremlin. I think he was wearing a red Star Trek Away Team shirt. After seeing Riley swallow that gremlin whole, he goes into full-on Super Saiyan God mode. And before Sam can even say, "Oh shoot," a snout slams him over the head with a rock of jade and knocks him out. We then fade into Sam recovering from a concussion, and Elle immediately starts chewing him out. See, these are the dysfunctional family threads that start to arise when you introduce an alcoholic into the situation. That's why I didn't like Nua. She needed to take her ass to a meeting and get a chip. Anyways, Riley descends from the sky and says, "Oh Sam, I'm thankful for you being such a screw up that I'm now damn near all powerful. So here's your stupid frozen parents back." And he drops Ma and Pa Wing down out of the sky, and they both unfreeze from their magical carbonite, and there's a big hug and love scene while Elle sits off pissed. Riley then returns to the gremlin mob and informs Ms. Claw the original deal is now changed. The original plan for him to take over the world while the gremlins got Riley's boat so they could go conquer the world and Ms. Claw could have sex with the Eiffel Tower. I swear that's really part of the story. So now Riley feels, I don't want a bunch of gremlins running amok and destroying the world that I'm trying to conquer. I didn't know I was going to be a god when I made this deal, so the deal has changed. And Ms. Claw don't like that. So as Riley opens up a portal to go rule over everything like the comic book supervillain he wants to be, the gremlins break out into an impromptu show tune. And just as their song and dance number wraps up, Riley feels 2 green hands creep around his neck, and it's Ms. Claw giving him a hug. Noggin explains, we know that's what you've needed, is a hug, right? We heard. And then all the gremlins start to hug Riley, jumping in from everywhere and smothering him. But he blasts them all off of him with his magic powers, and he informs Ms. Claw, don't you know I have enough magic to make it so this knife will never leave my hand? It's been magnetized to it. It'll be here forever. You'll never get it off of me. Why are you smiling? And in the blink of an eye, an axe slices down and cuts Riley's hand off, and the gremlins crack up. Riley holds up his stump, realizing he's not as godlike as he thought he was, and now Ms. Claw has the power of Grayskull. Riley announces, oh yeah, well I still got 1 hand left, and she uses the knife's magic to turn his hand into a mutated mound of nothing. Then at that moment, either overcome with pain or shock, Riley passes out and collapses onto the floor, and the gremlins are now in charge of the situation and more powerful than ever. Then Ms. Claw uses the knife of creation to zap all of the cutie pie Ewok Mogwai, so they turn into green, all-powerful, wicked Mogwai. Why feed him after midnight? We can shoot him with a knife, am I right? That means Gizmo is now the only furry Mogwai left on Earth. And as the realization that he's now an only child sinks in, we watch the green, ugly, angry gremlins start raining from the sky over 1920 Shanghai. The end! Okay, our penultimate episode opens on every Western depiction of China or Chinatown ever, except this time it's animated. A bunch of people are watching fireworks explode in the sky when a small child points out, hey look, did you guys ever see that movie Independence Day? But the audience remembers this is where episode 8 left off, with the entire gremlin population now evil and jumping through a magic portal to arrive in 1920 Shanghai to wreck shop. We then cut to the gremlin interpreter, Noggin, who's walking down the street enjoying the chaos he's helped create, when he notices a guy with a look he just has to have. I've been there. And after a second or two of off-screen murder, ta-da, Dr. Mindbender. Or maybe Colonel Clink for my older crowd. Speaking of references to old stuff, we see our guy henchman number 2 and his friend Hot Gremlin Vomit wash up on the shore. I'm glad to see they're okay after the gremlins threw them overboard. A lonely death at sea seemed unfortunate for somebody we liked. But after their long journey swimming back to Shanghai, arriving at their destination, they now find the tiny monsters that threw them overboard, literally raining from the sky. So the two of them decide it's best their little buddy comedy movie they got going wash up on some other shore, and back into the water they go. Then, amidst the terror, destruction, and awfulness, we see Ms. Claw still holding Gizmo hostage with the knife of creation. Since that's a good synopsis of where we're at in that story, we then cut to the Genesis Moon, where Captain Kirk sits calmly and Lieutenant Savick paces and ponders how to solve the unsolvable problem. Ma and Pa Wing are venting some of their hostility they've built up towards Riley Green over the last several episodes. Pop Wing takes a second from reenacting a hostile movie to comfort Sam about his feelings of inadequacy over not being a successful hero. But Elle is an orphan and hates to see a family getting along and functioning properly, so she tries to murder them. Pop Wing and Sam are like, well, this is a strange change of affairs, Elle. Why would you do something like that? Ma Wing says, this doesn't look like attempted murder. This looks like attempted vandalism. Elle says, you're darn right, buddy, because I knew none of you goody-goodies had it in you to do this. And before she even gets a chance to explain her thought process to the Wings, a portal opens up behind her and out pops the Celestial Administrator. He looks around and says, what's going on here? What have you done? Don't you know when I sent you here, I told you a bunch of things you weren't allowed to do and vandalism was one of them? Elle said, yeah, I do remember you saying that, and my mom always told me the fastest ride home is the cops. C to the Izze says, I'm not a taxi service, and since you like the law so much, I'm gonna throw the whole book at you. The punishment for vandalism is being sent to the worst place in the universe, and that currently is, and Elle says, the Velma cartoon? And he says, no, Shanghai. So a portal opens up, and Elle looks back and says, don't ever try to Kobayashi Maru me. So the whole fam plus Elle and Riley drop into the old Wing family medicine, and before they can even dust themselves off, as is customary from a cartoon fall, a crazed gremlin pops through the store front door, but before his menacing can even get into full swing, they punch him in the face, and they use the hole in the door as a portal into the world going on outside. Riley says, these tiny monsters are too evil to be called Mogwai. They remind me of something we talked about in the Royal Air Force. These are Bong. Pop Wing hits him in the back of the head with a wok, which is a callback to when Elle did it toward the end of episode 2. Pop Wing says, things are bad enough without having to listen to that guy talk. And Mom Wing says, that's the hottest thing I've ever seen. You kids go in the back and find some stuff to patch up this door. Mommy and Daddy need some alone time. In back, Elle explains to Sam, okay, now that we've got Mom and Dad back home safe, like I promised I would help you do, we have to go find Gizmo and that knife and save the world. And Sam says, I'm not an adventurer. The main reason all this happened is because it's me. It's my fault. And unfortunately, Wing Family Medicine hasn't figured out a cure for
for erectile dysfunction, so Ma and Pa Wing come barging into their conversation, and Ma Wing says, look, our family needs to stay together. You can do whatever you need to do, but we're here safe. And Elle is once again reminded, oh yeah, I'm an orphan. It's a hard knock life. So Elle says, screw you guys, I'm going not home, and goes running out into the streets to find and save Gizmo. But she only gets 3 or 4 feet before she's attacked by an evil gremlin, and like the psychopath she is, she stabs it to death repeatedly with the end of her umbrella. Girl, you need a hug and a counselor. And she turns a corner and sees she's basically entered Black Hawk Down, so she's not going to last very long out on these streets, and she needs to get off and quick. She sees a car to steal, and quick hops behind the wheel, and even though I doubt her feet could reach the pedals, she manages to take off, and she short rounds around town looking for Gizmo. But instead she sees Noggin at an outdoor haberdashery trying on hats, and she puts the pedal to the metal and she's gonna run him down. Luckily, for the sake of comedy, Noggin dodges out of the way. Elle crashes into something, hops out of the car, grabs Noggin by the neck and pins him up against the throat and begins to threaten him like the lunatic she is. She wants to know where's Gizmo and Ms. Claw. He says Madam Claw is running that nightclub right over there. Elle throws Noggin in a fruit cart. Oh my. And away he rolls, and off she goes to rescue Giz. We then cut back to the latest Purge sequel that is the Wing Family Medicine Shop, and Pop and Sam have almost got that door boarded up. We'll just go ahead and ignore those 2 big picture windows on either side of it. Sam's got a sad look on his face, so Mom explains to him, boy, you're not an adventurer like that. How many times does the world have to tell you? Now go on back and get some more nails for this wood. He finds the old mystery box, and he sees one of those talisman left over from the last time when he truly was brave. He then puts the box on, and out the door he goes. Pop notices, and him and Ma Wing go chasing behind him. Since the tension is heightened, we have to what? Cut away. We see the outside of Chun's Lung, where the Gremlins are doing usual gremlin in a bar stuff. 3 or 4 jokes on screen at once, the music's jumping, and Madam Claw is dressed like a flapper with her favorite pet sitting on her lapper. Sorry. We see some hep cats kicking out that groovy jazz, and we also see Elle getting past the outer defenses. Gizmo escapes for 1 second and tries to grab some cutlery off the table, but accidentally grabs a spoon instead of a knife and has to play it off like he was trying to put on a performance. The people at the next table think it's so awesome, they love it, and this George Burns-looking dude pops whatever the Gremlins cartoon equivalent of Dom Perignon is to celebrate. The cork hits Flapper Claw right in the nose and knocks her back for 1 second. Cork Popper's like, uh-oh, this ain't gonna be good. Madam Claw's got her heavy metal album cover knife out faster than you can say Shazam, and she zaps Bottle Service right in the face, and he turns into a Funko Pop. Gizmo's like, yeah, that's all great. You guys take it easy, bye. Ms. Claw's like, oh, no, you don't. So she gives Gizmo a good zap, and he returns back to the birdcage he was in episode 1. Everything coming full circle. Ms. Claw's like, no one cares about your love of story structure. Gizmo, dance. And dude does a mean Charleston, so much so that he distracts everybody from noticing that Elle is now in the room and slowly sneaking up on getting Gizmo back. We then cut to Sam and Ma and Pa Wing running through the back alleys of Shanghai. They're arguing about whether or not Sam should be doing this as they jog. Eventually, the mic drop moment had to happen in that argument, and she points out, Grandpa is dead because of all this. You need to stop. And before Sam gets a chance to explain himself, he's attacked by a gang of gremlins. He pulls out one of his little ninja exploding bombs, and a giant dust cloud explodes out over everything. Sam then gets up and takes an old random board and busts it over the head of all the gremlins remaining. Mom and Pa Wing are like, dang, this dude grew up over 9 episodes. Okay, I guess that's all we needed to see. Go get him, Tiger. And with that demonstration of skill, we cut back to Chun's Lung, and we've got black spots all over it. The gremlins inside the nightclub are doing their usual gremlin stuff. Our guy Sideburns is crooning out a hit, while Elle stealthily tiptoes through the shadows. Some gremlins acting the fool, swinging on the chandelier, crash to the ground and almost kill Ms. Claw. Uh-oh. So Madam Claw has had enough of the insubordinate tomfoolery going on by the knuckleheads around her, and she begins zapping people. First she makes one into a bobblehead, then she zaps another one and turns him into a blacklight poster. Arguably, this one looks kind of delicious, like taffy or something. I want to eat that gremlin. Elle uses the distraction to finally make her way to Gizmo in the birdcage, but the gremlins catch her, and she gets cornered on stage. Ms. Claw points the knife at her, jumps up on stage, slowly, menacingly creeping toward her, and she snatches Gizmo away and decides to pose for the airbrushed portrait on the side of a really cool guy's van. But before she can zap Elle and give her really giant earlobes or whatever the hell she was gonna do, Ma and Pa Wing showed up, and they're part of the lighting department. It's incredibly important in show quality, don't you know? Elle then snatches up Gizmo and runs him back to the Wing family, and Sam and Gizmo have an adorable reunion, while Ms. Claw starts to bubble under the hot lights. Elle uses this as a chance to sack the quarterback, but QB1 fumbles. The scrabble for the loose ball is on. Unfortunately, Ms. Madam Flapper Claw grabs it first and zaps herself right in the face and starts
starts to become a kaiju. Somewhere around the 2 or 3 story mark, she becomes the same size as the original King Kong. Sam, Elle, and all the other terrified gremlins go running out of Chung's lung. Once outside, Sam meets up with his family, and they have a touching reunion. Elle is then reminded, oh yeah, I'm an orphan. I almost forgot for a minute. I don't get kisses, I get kicks. It's a hard knock life. But Queen Klong has had enough of my bad Annie recitations and starts stomping on everything in sight as a good kaiju should. Little gremlins, people on the street, almost Elle. And since tension is at its highest, we have to cut away. We see 3 gremlins have made it through the boards holding the door closed at Wing Family Medicine. They look around and see nothing but a footlocker under a spotlight. By the way, when they gave Riley Green more brain damage with his second excessive hit to the head with a wok, they took his near lifeless body and they threw it inside this trunk before everybody left. Anyways, carry on, gremlins. They start to peek inside and jump scare. Riley with no hands eats one like it's a pie eating contest, tearing flesh off the monster's back as it screams in pain, and then his eyes glow as he rises up out of the box. The end. Okay, so the finale of the hit animated series that's taking America by storm opens with the ruination and destruction of 1920s Shanghai. And besides the problematic tiny monsters, there's also a giant monster. A kaiju Ms. Claw is stomping around crushing people. Just ask this guy. She bellows into the night like an angry T-Rex while everything that can move does move. The magical knife with the power of creation sits in the palm of her hand like a tic-tac. Elle, Sam, and Fam are like, we've lived through the horror genre, the fantasy genre, the superhero genre, and now the giant monster genre? Are you kidding me? I signed up for a kid's cartoon, not this crap. Popwing's like, oh yeah, I forgot, Mom's trapped under this rubble, we should probably dig her out. So they do when they realize they need to get her off that busy street immediately before they all get squished. They run down a deserted alley, then they plop down to rest for a minute and have some witty back and forth bonding banter. Sam says, I love a good let's all be friends scene, but we should probably fight the giant lizard instead. Just then, Madam Lady Giant Ms. Queen Klong goes stomping by looking like Heath Ledger's Joker. But in between pondering why so serious, she notices a billboard that reminds her the happiest time of her life was just a few minutes ago when she was holding Gizmo hostage against his will. She still has aspirations of humping the Eiffel Tower, she just wants Gizmo there while she does it, and while she humps the Statue of Liberty as well. Basically, she's got a Gizmo fetish. She needs him there to get off. So having this breakthrough in her sexuality, and with no real stalker laws in 1920s China, off she goes to find Gizmo. Good luck, buddy. Gizmo decides to get proactive and says, let's go get her first. Sam's like, yeah! And Elle's like, well, I guess the story will never end if we don't. Ma and Pa Wing are like, well, hey, come back so we can all be a big happy family at the end. And Elle says, thanks. On your way back, if you get into trouble, just blow this. Tell him Elle sent you. Sam and his family hug one last time. A lot of hugging in this show. A lot of hugging. And off they go running into the burning streets like the Avengers. And the credits pop up to remind us all that was just a cold open and this is going to be an adventure. By the way, I had previously said there was nothing really special going on during the intro scene that you can skip over. There's little trinkets from the various adventures they go on during the season. So you can see the clay knife, you can see the birdcage they keep Gizmo in, etc., etc. Meanwhile, back at the previously unyet named Purge sequel, Riley Green now walks around and inspects the damage, as Noggin did earlier. He sees an advertisement for The Flash, but can't help but notice there's a 3-story giant Mogwai stomping around the city, angry and looking to eat everything. Sam, Elle, and Gizmo notice as well. Queen Klong realizes this is just stupid carrying this tiny little thing around and throws it down her throat like a Tylenol. Gizmo comes swooping in like the action hero he's grown into and goes flying directly into Sarlacc's pit. Once inside the mouth of the monster, he notices the magical knife of creation caught between her teeth like a popcorn kernel. Having just swallowed a laughably tiny knife and a small fur ball, she needs a drink. So she grabs the water tower off the top of a building and tries to wash it all down. The problem is 3 angry Mogwais are also hanging onto the water tower and go down her gullet as well. Once in the whale's belly, they see Pinocchio poking around and start attacking him. Gizmo starts bopping around towards the back near the tonsils, and it triggers the gag reflex. Out everybody goes! Gizmo and the knife, covered in saliva and God only knows what else, land on the roof safely, I don't know how, and Lady Claw feels that something is different. And in this heightened moment of tension, we do what? Cut away! That's right, we cut away! We see Ma and Pa Wing approached by gremlins on a bicycle. The bike gang slowly circles Ma and Pa, building tension and terror, until Pa pulls out the magic whistle and blows it. It's just a soft little
pearls. But that's all it takes for a hatchet to rain down from the sky like Sin City. The villainous kids from Hostel 2 show up and engage the Gremlins in the street gang battle from the Beat It video. Look at that 85-pound tabloid baby. These Gremlins are in trouble. Since it appears this sitch is handled, we see Sam bounding from rooftop to rooftop like Daredevil trying to track down Gizmo and the magic knife. But we see the first place finisher in the race to rescue Gizmo and get the knife is Riley Green. Ruh-roh. Sam and Riley have a little back and forth, and instead Elle runs at him with murder in her heart and a blood-soaked parasol in her hand. And before Riley Green can say, "Stop calling me my full name every time, you can call me Riley, that's my name," he uses the magic knife to bring some rope to life and ties Sam and Elle up to once again take them out of the fight. He then uses the magic knife to think his hands back into existence. In between being grossed out by the crackling bone noises, Gizmo digs his tiny buck teeth into his forearm to get away. Riley lets him go because now he has 2 hands and all the power in the world. And as he goes into one of his usual long-winded monologues about how he's become a god, Queen Klong reaches in and grabs Riley around the torso and starts to squish. Riley Green realizes he's screwed and tries to barter with the big beast. He says, "Remember that deal we had where you could see the world? I'm sorry I went back on it. Let's put that back in play. Here, let's look at the skies of Tahiti right now." A portal opens up and the bright, beautiful sunlight peering in between palm trees comes blasting in. Zzz, zzz, zzz. Gremlins everywhere are vaporized into grossness and goo. Riley floats away and lands on a rooftop in time to watch Ms. Claus start to bubble and pop. The sun melts and purees everything its rays can touch. Eventually, the bright light and heat are too much for Queen Claw, and she develops onset acne, the likes you've never seen. Splat, squish, gross. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is gone. Sam and Elle was like, "That is gross, but I'm very glad it happened." Riley Green comes floating down and says, "Let's not start rubbing our butts on each other just yet. We've still got my subplot to deal with." And Mr. God Complex lifts them into the sky and explains how he's going to run this whole world. He's going to turn all the living things left on it into the roaches. Starting with you two. But Elle says, "You want to be king of the roaches? Gotta have a lot of confidence in what you're thinking about to use that knife properly. You were just thinking about being king of the roaches. You wouldn't want to be King Roach, would you? Be a cockroach? You want to be a cockroach?" And the knife starts fizzling out on him, and she says, "A cockroach?" And we see Sam, and he says, "A cockroach? You don't want to think about cockroaches, do you? Cockroach. Cockroach." "Stop it! Stop it!" "Cockroach." And Riley zaps himself with the knife and immediately starts to transform into a David Cronenberg movie. First he pukes up little pearls of white something or other. Then the green knife floats up into the sky as Riley's arms turn into roach hands and he starts growing tentacles, and slowly he turns into a tiny, tiny roach as the knife falls down from the sky and slashes him in half. Wah, wah, wah. Sam's like, "Whoa, what are these?" And Elle's like, "Hold on, vomit pearls later. Let's figure out what we're going to do about the rest of these gremlins left." The slimy green giggling goblins climb over the roof's edge and start to surround them. All is lost. It's the all is lost moment. And then at that point, Sam takes the knife, and just like he couldn't do before where he didn't believe in himself, now he does. He thinks to himself, "I can invent Thundercats 60 years earlier." And he raises the knife above his head, and power goes everywhere and blasts the gremlins away. The purple power of whatever his wish was permeates through Shanghai. We see the chaotic gremlin activity return to adorable Tribbles nonsense. People everywhere on the brink of destruction are saved by aw. Even the baby with the 2-pack-a-day habit has to take awe at how adorable these Ewok Mogwai are. Even Snout's rowdy ass turns back into being cute. Elle and Gizmo notice Sam is starting to get too white while using all this magical power. They're afraid he's going to redline and explode. The fear in their hearts start to bubble over to the expression in their eyes. "Sam, don't. Sam, don't." And just like that, he doesn't. Oh, look how cute that is. Everybody has a good hearty laugh at how adorable these fuzzy little Mogwais are. And we see the vomit pearls laying on the ground around them begin to glow. We see magical energy radiate up off of them and become silhouettes of people. Who is this? Who is this? It's Grandpa! With the right musical key, trust me, this was kind of a sweet moment, even though very predictable. Grandpa and Sam have a big hug. Lots of hugging on this show. Lots of hugging. And the wacky little Tribble gremlins are like, "What in the hell are these?" As the other glowing magical pearls transform into Riley's old chef, and the guy who taught Riley how to do pearl magic, and the woman who taught Riley how to sing. And then Elle comes to the conclusion that Riley was even worse than a bandit, and they're the worst. But out of all the people who were turned into pearls and swallowed,
out, we see the last one has a giant snake tail, and in his adorable voice, Gizmo says, "Nua!" and runs up and gives her a big hug. A lot of hugging on this show, a lot of hugging. And as Elle learns the backstories of the puke pearl pod people, Sam gives a quick synopsis of what has happened over the last 10 episodes to Grandpa and blows his old mind. Nua starts rounding up Gizmo. We cut to a short time later where she's ushering them all through a portal back to the Valley of Jade. And as we see order return to the universe and the Mogwai going back home, we see Sam offering Grandpa a chance to go on a magical adventure onto the Valley of Jade. And he says, "When I was swallowed inside that pearl inside Riley Green, all I wanted to do was be home with my family." And they all give each other a big hug because there's a lot of hugging on the show. And then Elle and Nua give each other the "you're not so different, you and me" look. And before our hero Gizmo can depart, Elle and Sam have to run over and give him a big hug because there's a lot of hugging on this show. And we see Gizmo do his adorable trademark waddle as he wanders back to the Valley of Jade. E.T. go home. But he stops and turns and looks over his shoulder and waves one last time with his eyes welled up full of tears. And everybody's like, "Oh, we're gonna miss you too. I wish we could hug one last time because there hasn't been enough hugging on this show." And Gizmo appears to be emotionally wrecked, so much so that Nua, in between the DT shakes brought on by newfound sobriety, can even notice. So she says, "Do you want to go back?" And he says, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, maybe it's time for humans to have one more chance at the Mogwai challenge." And Gizmo goes running back, and you know what we get? That's right, a hug. And everybody smiles and hugs, and the portal closes, and all the Mogwai except for Gizmo are safe back in the happy little green butthole. Then we fade to a short time later when all the fires have been put out and insurance claims filed. We see the now restored Wing Family Medicine Shop with all of our family intact, happy and loving, with a new adopted delivery girl. Elle and Ma Wing seem to really develop a bond. I can relate to Elle. I've also bonded with Wings. So as everything ends as happy and peachy as can be, we cut to the port where a ship is taking off. Deep in the belly of the boat, we see Noggin wearing the magical ring so he wasn't changed back or forced to go into the portal. Another loose gremlin exists as the boat slowly sails off to San Francisco waiting for Season 2. The end of Season 1.